The theme is same for U.S.-Japan collaboration, policy collaboration, and geoeconomics of policy collaboration between U.S. and Japan with new administrations. And then both Mr. Crow and Mr. Suzuki have been from long business experience, and Mr. Crow was originally in Air Force, and then also Northrop Grumman. He was Chief Technology Officer, and then now he is he's a consulting. He established his own consulting company called Mirai Building, a very great name. Those who do not have Japanese, Mirai means future, so future building. Great name. And then, most importantly for us, he is a fellow of SMU Tower Center. Thank you very much for your contribution to the Tower Center. Mr. Suzuki is Senior Vice President of NTT Data. So he is one of the business leaders of DFW. And so first, I will hear from Mr. Crow, and then he actually focuses on space. And then we hear from Mr. Suzuki about AI and IT. So very interesting and important topics. So please join me for welcoming Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Hiroki, and thank you, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and it's really exciting to follow after Suzuki Sensei's very thought-provoking keynote address at lunch. And just on this panel, I guess for clarity, I'll refer to Suzuki Sensei and Suzuki-san, if that's okay. So we know whom I'm
makes a lot of sense.
But what I wanted to do, and you can see the title up here a little bit, I want to pick up sort of where Suzuki Sensei left off with geoeconomics and with the idea of the reality of the need to focus on economic security and sort of what some of the drivers and the underlying ideas of that are. And then I want to try to find space in that reality that he described for economic growth, because the traditional world that he traced the history of free trade and of collaboration, of course, is also associated with great growth, with great business opportunity. So as I'm spending my time in business, that's really, I think, for me, one of the most important questions is where to find opportunities within this now more complicated landscape that the geoeconomics principles that Suzuki Sensei laid out, I think, really describe very well. So also with apologies to Suzuki Sensei, I took the liberty of making a new term. So today is the debut of my term astroeconomics. And I just thought I couldn't really call it geoeconomics because we're not on the Earth and when I'm talking about space. So I don't know if this is going to work. You can give me feedback and tell me if you think it does. Maybe it's a bad idea, but anyway, just to try to make the point that I'll be referencing that landscape of geoeconomics, but then I'll take it into and I'll talk about contours of what this looks like in a space setting, and then hopefully point to some ideas of where there may still be some constraints, but also some opportunities. So before I go further, let me just say why space. Why do I pick this area? Well, one, I love it. So it's just an area I enjoy working in. And in my background in defense and aerospace, the space side for me has always been the aspirational part of this, and so the hopeful, growing, building part, and where I really feel that there's a lot of opportunity to create value and also to do things that are intrinsically good and beneficial. But it's not just all sort of idealism. The size of the space economy is growing and projected to continue to grow substantially. So McKinsey & Company, for example, has done studies which point to a $1 trillion global space economy by 2030 and maybe 1.8 trillion by 2035. So the idea that there is opportunity in this arena if we can find it and balance some of the constraints that we've been talking about, navigate that, it makes it worth doing materially as well. So I'm going to talk about sort of two lenses through my opening comments to look for this opportunity. One is the astroeconomics piece that I mentioned, and the other one is the term robust complementarity, and I'll sort of define that when I get to it. But let me start with the astroeconomics piece and see if I can describe that with the next chart. Okay, here we go. Those words I know are too small, so I do apologize. But let me just describe what it means, and it's a table. And what I really tried to trace here is three areas that help define, and I use the term contours. What are the contours of this, the dimensions of the astroeconomy or astroeconomics? And there's a policy piece to this. There's a technical piece and a financial piece. And what these shape are really, I think, where there are groupings of countries. So again, as Suzuki Sensei mentioned, it starts with geography, it starts with countries. And then what we're looking for are areas of alignment and areas of common interest, or if you will, subsets of a global set of opportunities, and how do we define sort of practical collaboration opportunities within that. So what I've sort of done is you walk across there. So first off, again, apologies, these are a list of countries down that first column, and there are two that are highlighted, so maybe no surprise. One is Japan and one is the US. And what the message of this chart is meant to be as you go through these different columns, that only Japan and US share all of the factors that I've identified here. So what are those factors? Just to hit them quickly. On the policy side, there are two. The first one is being a signatory to the Outer Space Treaty. This is the most fundamental treaty and the only global treaty on the use of outer space, stating that it should be for peaceful purposes. 115 countries are signatories to that. Of course, US and Japan as well. The next policy piece or differentiator is the Artemis Accords, which is much more recent. About half, 53 countries are signatories to that. And importantly, this excludes countries like India, Iran, and of course, Russia and China. And so the Artemis Accords, what they really add, among other things, just to differentiate it, this is not about the Artemis moon program. Because there is a same name, it's a little confusing. There's a specific program called Artemis. The Artemis Accords are a statement of principles, and one of those elements is about the economic use of space. So if the Outer Space Treaty was about peaceful use, the Artemis Accords introduced the idea of economic use of space and how countries can begin to approach that. So two important policy elements. Then I have three technical elements that I think are illustrative of alignment in capabilities, which is very important. So the first, 15 countries are partners on the International Space Station. 15 somewhat overlapping, but different countries have the capability to launch objects into space. Only 5 countries have successfully landed on the moon. And so that, when you look across those, you can see Japan has done all of those. And then the final one for financial, there are a number of different ways to think about financial criteria, but here I just set a threshold somewhat arbitrarily. Is there at least $1 billion in government spending in the space sector? And both Japan and the US have that. Many of the others, some do, some don't. And so at this, you see that there are sort of raw materials, if nothing else, of strong alignment for US and Japan. So if those are sort of, if you'll allow me, this idea of astroeconomics, something that takes these contours and with the added addition really maybe of space capability, what helps to define alignment, this is the way that I think a bit about that. So what next? Let's see. I'm going to talk a little more about the idea. Here we go. how to collaborate and this idea of robust complementarity. So I'll say this is the second lens, but what does that mean? And again, Suzuki Sensei, thank you for such a great setup, because you talked about the challenge of having aligned values in the current era of economic security, and you talked about the if I took the trap of interdependence, which can create some maybe some difficulties or some opportunity for this weaponization of trade and collaboration. So the idea of something that is based on the principle of comparative advantage. Why do we trade? Why do we work together? Well, comparative advantage still has a lot of value in helping to say why collaboration can be valuable. But of course, it now has many sort of constraints or risks around it if we're too vulnerable as a result of that interdependence. But a robust complementarity is differentiated from traditional thinking about comparative advantage in two ways. One is there's an idea of strength. And so you're coming into a relationship with capabilities that you have that put you in a position of some credibility and some ability to operate or some ability to control or to influence outcomes. That can be a certain degree of, one could say, sovereignty, or another term, a little softer, non-dependence. You're not critically vulnerable. And again, to the extent that idea of finding others' vulnerabilities and protecting your own, is sort of aligned with this idea. But then the second idea of a robust complementarity is it's robust because you have the shared values and that you are working with people where that trust exists. So here, the example I threw up to represent this is not actually a space example, but it's a defense example. But I think it's a relevant one, and it's a photograph of the next generation fighter aircraft that Japan is developing with the UK and with Italy, called the Global Combat Air Program. And the words that are on there about three countries with shared values, I didn't put those words on there. I thought it was just perfect, because this came from the display that the countries put up when they were showcasing this at a recent aerospace forum. But it gets to the heart of, I think, robust complementarity, because in this example, all three countries share strength in developing advanced aircraft. They have a need for this, and they share these values around what would shape the contours of a long-term commitment to a program like developing a new fighter aircraft together. So I thought this could sort of illustrate what I'm getting at with this idea of robust complementarity with a non-space example. So then, let's say, now we go back to space, and we'll say, what could that look like in Japan's case? And I'll start with this slide that sort of has two parts to it. And there's both what I think it is not, and represented on the bar graph. And then I'll talk about maybe an idea of what it could be represented by the photograph. So what it's not, I think is, it's not complementarity, or it's not trying to be a complement to your partner if you're trying to do exactly the same thing in exactly the same way. So that's sort of the risk of getting into too much of a defensive position if we think about where sort of unlimited pessimistic thinking of geoeconomics or astroeconomics could get us. Is it says everybody needs to just spend all their resources internally, then everybody needs to develop their own independent, in this case, space launch capability, their own independent satellite constellations, their own independent everything. And we have a bunch of countries duplicating each other all over the place. Well, that would be probably not a prescription I would recommend for Japan. And I just, the scale of the two space economies, I think, illustrates that while both are over $1 billion of government funding, and so we've got a substantial element of capability there. If you look at the investment and we look at the overall opportunity size, Japan would have a very long ways to go, and it would probably be ultimately not promising for them to try to replicate the U.S. space economy if they were to independently develop all of the necessary capabilities and create all the economic opportunity. So I'd say it's not about trying to catch up or match point for point. the strengths that the U.S. has in the space market. What I think it could be, and I think a strong opportunity, is to play to strengths. And so here I'm introducing the idea of space adjacent areas of the economy. And so robotics is what's illustrated here, of course. And I think there are a number of areas that are traditional, call them terrestrial areas of the economy, where Japan is very strong, not typically counted as part of a space economy. But if we think about where space is going, with increased opportunities to build things in space, if we think about launch for just a moment, thanks to SpaceX primarily, and now others who are entering into the launch market, the cost of moving things from the Earth into orbit has dropped by a factor of 50 in just the last 15 to 20 years. So 50 times reduction, and it's poised to be dropped, to reduce even more. So what that means is that now many things which previously would have had to have been designed in a very precise and expensive way to be used in space. So there was a whole distinct ecosystem around creating capabilities for space, because it was so expensive to get them into space. That is no longer the primary criteria. And instead of, it used to be all in engineering, we would talk about mass to orbit, how heavy is something, because that was equated with cost. Now it's really about efficiency and effectiveness in getting capability into orbit, where things that are much more commercial grade can often serve purposes in space, sometimes without any change at all, particularly in areas like microelectronics. Robotics, maybe with some small changes to the devices, but the capability that Japan has in robotics is a very strong asset, which essentially could be added on top of the bar chart on the left if we said, let's bring space adjacent economies to bear space adjacent market capabilities. And Japan really, by all counts, is a global superpower in robotics. Just a couple of statistics for those who as I was doing a little research for this, 40% of global robotics production from Japan in 2020, installing nearly 50,000 industrial robots annually, and very large very large innovation base in robotics. There's even a Japanese space company called Keizai that's specifically looking at doing this with a space robot arm. And not to be advertising for them, but I'll say they kind of do like this. Just imagine a robot arm that goes on a space station that would look like those industrial robots. That's an example of how this space adjacent portion of the market from robotics can potentially play in as a complement in a robust manner for Japan. So it allows Japan to bring something else to the table. So then my last slide, just to illustrate what that can look like, to bring it back around to space. Here's the moon, and Japan has landed on the moon thanks to iSpace, and their lander. What I show here is actually a different company, and I chose this one intentionally because it connects back to the sort of robotics and microelectronics theme. And Texas. This is a Texas company, Firefly Aerospace, that just landed on the moon here in the past couple of weeks. And you see a photograph. This is it's a self-portrait, if you will, of the lander's shadow on the moon, and then looking towards the Earth. So the circle in the top is the Earth. So I think it's just an artistically beautiful photograph. But how this, I think, for my last slide, I thought helps to illustrate all of these points, except that at the moment, this is not a Japanese collaborative product, but robotics and artificial intelligence were very key to this lander's success in the way that many other commercial landers have been only partially successful or have failed in many times. Because what this lander did as it was coming down, well, starting from the design point, they emphasized putting very sophisticated artificial intelligence and robotic guidance capabilities into the landing sequence. So they let this do basically what the human astronauts did as they were landing on the moon, which is that it had authority to move, to change where it was going to land based on what it saw on board and make a last minute decision. And if anybody like me has spent a lot of time reading the details of how the Apollo lunar lander astronauts flew down to the moon, it's quite exciting, I can tell you. They made a lot of decisions, the humans right there on the spot, because you couldn't have controllers from the Earth. There's not enough time, and you don't have strong enough communications to be able to guide it down during those last seconds onto the lunar surface. And where Firefly's lander was different from many of the others that have not quite fully landed in their intended positions recently or have completely failed, it had this autonomous ability, and it took over. The autonomous landing capability did when it was a few hundred feet off the surface of the moon, and it actually scouted around and found a different landing space that was a little outside of what the engineers had initially thought it would land at, but it found a safe spot, and it settled down so gently onto the lunar surface that they'd also invested quite a bit in some really robust lunar landing legs that they didn't have to actually do much work because it was such a gentle landing. So this was a Texas success and a robotics success. My point in putting this up here is that I believe it illustrates the opportunity for complementarity between the US and Japan and more business opportunities in space if we bring things like robotics and artificial intelligence that Japan has very strong capabilities into this domain. So I'll pause there, and then I think, Hiroki, do you just move down to for the next speaker after this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next, Mr. Yoichiro Suzuki from NTT Data. And those who do not know about NTT or NTT Data, it's a company of telecommunications originally, but expanding the business to various areas, including AI. That's what I have heard from Suzuki-san. So you will see. So please join me for welcoming Mr. Yoichiro Suzuki.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Takeuchi-sensei, for a kind introduction of myself. Again, so I am Yoichiro Suzuki. Suzuki-sensei is a big Suzuki, and I am a small Suzuki. Sorry for this confusion. Yeah, so thank you very much for having me and giving myself and the NTT to talk about ourselves. So to be honest, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with such a great audience here. I'm still wondering if I'm the right person to talk about such an important topic, but 2 weeks ago, Big Boss Shichijo-san just called me to be on the panel, so I couldn't say no. So I'm still happy to be part of this community and the forum and try to give some idea what we are doing as an NTT, as a national flag company in Japan, and then so try to enjoy this conversation with a great panel and the moderator Takeuchi-sensei. So maybe I don't need to ask this question with this audience, but this is my typical questions before beginning my conversation. Who knows NTT? Please raise it. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Japan American Society. I'm really happy to be here. I can feel more home in here. So,
but sorry, our students didn't raise hand, so but a lot of people didn't know. So
yeah, so the reason why this is my typical question. I always ask this, and especially compared to the Toyota. Toyota, 100% everyone knows even here, but asking about NTT, much less, maybe 10 times less. That's a reality, But in Japan, Toyota and NTT and maybe Japan Airlines, the top tier valuable brand in there. But for NTT, if we go outside of Japan, the brand awareness is pretty low, significantly low. So this has been a very big agenda for the NTT for long years. So then that is getting more important, right? How to elevate our brand awareness outside of Japan, especially along with the geo-economics agenda. So that's what we have been trying to make progress, but still a lot of things that we have to think about. So I'd like to learn more about this alliance and today, and we'd like to create a more, better future. So what does NTT stand for? Nippon Telegram Telephone. I never seen the telegram in my life, by the way. Any of you, I don't know, but what I want to say is the very old name. In other words, NTT has a very long history and heritage, actually 150 years plus the history, and we started our business with a telephone company from the name. And by the way, Nippon means Japan in Japanese, just in case. So yeah, so this is our origin. But after 150 years, we are very different. NTT is huge, complicated, and unique, if I want to say that. So just simple slide, I'd like to introduce who we are and what NTT is doing before going into the discussion today. So if you look at the left-hand side, there's a couple of the data points. So we have 100 billion the business size in revenue, the 300,000 plus employees across the world, and more than 950 subgroups under NTT umbrella. So, and if you go to the right-hand side, this is a business segment we are using for the disclosure. And the first two categories, this is pure Japanese business. Mobile business led by the Docomo, and then telephone business, NTT East and then the West. So they are still representing the 60% of our business, so still huge. But as you know, those businesses are shrinking or struggling to make a growth anymore because of the Japanese economic growth limitation or shrinking of the population or more competitiveness of the domestic and the Japanese market. The third category, so this is where I'm from, the NTT data. We are using the different brand under the NTT family. So we are doing the wide variety of IT services, including the applications, the consulting, cloud transformation, data analytics, data centers, network, and everything. So it's I can say that it's pretty much everything related to the IT or ICT. So those are what we are doing. So under the NTT data, this is a combination of the Japan business and the non-Japan business. I mean, we call that a global business outside of Japan. Now 60% of our business is coming from outside of Japan. Then I'm part of that as a North America division. So, and then NTT data's global business, we have expanded our presence through the acquisition, probably more than 99%. Even in the US, two major acquisitions for the last 15 years. The first big one is we acquired a company named Kim based in Boston, 2010. It's kind of the billion size of the company. And the second and the largest acquisition was Dell Services we made. That's a carve out from the Computer Dell's IT service division 7-8 years ago. Now that is formerly Perot Systems, the company founded by Ross Perot. So now our headquarters is based in here, North Texas and Plano. So we have a very strong bond with this local community. So then we are representing the 30% of the all entire entities in the business presence, and then still continue to grow. Then last category is so a bunch of the others, including real estate company as well as energy company. So mostly that they are leading the sustainability agenda. So how to make this world better with technology, especially the energy consumption or something like that. So, and then I said that NTT is unique. I think the two aspects. The one is we have a very heavy R&D agenda as an IT company. So we have spent almost $4 billion every single year for the R&D activities. So actually, so we have NTT has created their own Gen AI solution. We call it the Tsuzumi. Still very much focusing on the Japanese language, but it's going through the market at this point of time and try to expand the English version or global version at this point of time. Try to get more ability into the outside of the Japan, so the market. So, and then we have two R&D company, NTT Research and Venture Capitals, both based in Silicon Valley and North America. So, and the NTT Research company is actually the having the huge presence of the quantum computing thing. That's, I think that this is one of the very important agenda from the national security perspective. So, before ending my presentation, I'd like to introduce one quick video, to talk about one of the biggest focus as NTT for the next couple of years.
Is it possible for this world to change? Is it possible to change this world? The future is the cumulative effect of the changes we make now. Take that first step toward the future. ION.
ION will create a network and information communication platform that replaces the flow of all information with light in order to contribute to the resolving of social issues and create business. It is also characterized by its extremely innovative vision. ION will connect all information on people and things in aiming to realize a mutually happy and harmonious state for everything in the natural world. This is, in fact, an extremely difficult state to achieve. For example, the simultaneous implementing of multiple and diverse initiatives, such as the SDGs, is possible when the goals are mutually compatible. But the goal to save the global environment and goal to promote economic growth may lead to a conflict. We believe it is possible to achieve such goals at the same time and create new value. That's what ION is all about. Moving forward, the number of devices connected to the network will skyrocket around the world, dramatically increasing the burden on the network and boosting the consumption of power by individuals, companies, data centers, and so on. The global environment is expected to deteriorate due to increased supply and consumption of energy. In the modern world, economic growth is achieved through the massive consumption of energy. But is it possible to reduce energy consumption and achieve economic growth at the same time? To overcome this difficult issue, ION has achieved a breakthrough.
One of the three factors that has enabled this is the all-photonics network, which converges electronics with photonics to massively boost power efficiency and reduce electricity consumption to 100. Moreover, it will realize a dramatic increase in communication capacity and lower latency. Digital twin computing will also realize interactions that supersede simple simulations of the real world by allowing the free combining of a variety of digital twins of everything, from people to things in cyberspace. It will enable predicting of the future. Cognitive foundation will allow the use of resources that extend beyond the domain of industries and regions through a multi-orchestrator capable of integrated management of a variety of resources.
These technologies will reduce energy consumption while simultaneously allowing economic growth. They will also function as the basis for realizing a better, sustainable world by creating many new services and solving social issues. This is not a dream, but steps have already been taken toward its realization. IWON 1.0 will be launched in 2023. It will then evolve into IWON 4.0 beyond 2030. Of course, realizing this will require collaboration with a wide range of partners, as well as a variety of breakthroughs. IWON Global Forum is an organization that aims to realize and promote IWON. So, let's listen to what the members hope to achieve.
And it's clear that digital technologies like AI, emerging platforms like high-speed optical wireless networking are going to change the game completely.
We do hope that we be part of the leading group adopting the service to be offered.
Numerous companies all over the world are now starting to support and take part in realizing the vision and technologies for IWON, striving to realize a natural world in which everything is able to coexist in harmony.
Thank you. Video is not a little longer than I thought. Should be the shorter one, but thank you for watching that. We NTT is trying to make this ION as a next generation network platform. In other words, platform of the 6G. Because frankly speaking, we in Japan probably lost the competition with the 5G. Maybe in China and the US and South Korea. Have been taking the more important role there. So, now AI is everywhere, right? Gen AI is everywhere, but still it's just going just expanding. Now it's coming back to how to make more business with the real, in the real world. Then more connection, more data consumption, and the more data, energy usage, as you see in here. So if we lost all of the connection at the same time, it's going to be disaster, right? The network connectivity, trustable platform going to be the very, very important for this world. And then this is kind of the national agenda. So NTT still, if you look at the shareholder of NTT, still 30% of the shareholder is the Japanese government. We are the public traded company in there. 40 years ago, we went public, but still, our agenda and the Japanese national agenda are a lot in common. So, this is probably the typical example why geoeconomics is very important for the NTT's business. So, and again, but it's a long way towards the realistic in the world when we have a digital twin or all the connection with the IoT or so next phase of this world. But NTT is now trying to take a more important part along with so all of this society. So thank you very much.
Now back to Dr. Suzuki.
Well, I think I've said enough in my keynote speech, so I have nothing more to add. I'd rather to spare more time for the Q&A, but just to make a brief comment on what Stan has said and also Yoichiro-san has mentioned. First of all, I think the space. I fully agree with what Stan says about the economic aspect of the space activities. I mean, there are perhaps everyone knows that Mr. Elon Musk has been sort of pioneered the commercial space activities, but I think he has made a lot of followers to enter into a commercial market. And that opens up the more transnational space activities. The space activities take are traditionally considered as a strategic and a very national activities, and international collaborations such as the International Space Station has been sort of a joint project to bridge the different jurisdictions. But now the commercial space is transcends all the different jurisdictions and connecting each other. For example, the Japanese space activities, Gitai, that Stan has mentioned, is the Japanese company, but they're holding the headquarters in the United States. There are companies such as Astroscale, which is to reduce or to actively remove debris, space debris, and this is one of the perhaps the pioneer in this domain as a commercial company, and it has the subsidiaries in United States, UK, France, and Israel. So there are many those international, transnational activities, and this is where the Japan and the United States are working together. And I think it's going to be tomorrow or 30th. It's Sunday, but on Sunday, Mr. Hexes, the Secretary of Defense, and Mr. Nakatani, the Minister for Defense, are going to meet and talk about the defense collaboration on the space and to jointly build the international satellite network for detecting the hypersonic gliding vehicle, which is the China, Russia, or even North Korea has, which is different from the ballistic missile, which is now being a threat for our security. And Japan and the United States are jointly working to build the monitoring or the detection system for missile defense. So these are the prime example of what we can do in space, and I think space is no longer the national in a stricter sense. It is becoming more international, transnational, and this commercial space has created a lot of impact on the possibility of this, the collaborative activities between two countries. And Yoichiro-san's point was also very interesting. I mean, the NTT, I have personal connection with the chairman of the NTT, Mr. Sawada, and also NTT is one of the member companies supporting my institute, Institute of Geoeconomics. So we have a very deep understanding of what the NTT does. And the ION, the video shows that this is a new technology. If it becomes available, then it will contribute for the indispensability of Japan, because this is significantly reducing the energy consumption for the semiconductor and any electronic devices, and this will change. This is a game changer. So ION is a very interesting attempt to transform the electronics to the photonics, and this is something that it has nobody ever have done. And this is exactly the case of the indispensability. If this ION technology is becoming available in the market, then it is contributing to all kinds of questions, reducing energy consumptions, reducing carbon emissions, for contributing to global, not just on the energy side, but also the speed of the connections. And connected to the space, the NTT is now planning to have this data center in space. So satellite is becoming as a server, and then it's connected with multiple satellites in the sky, so that it doesn't require the cooling system, because space is cool enough. So I think this is another, out of the box thinking to make this space connected. But this is also requiring a new telecommunication mechanism called the fiber optical connections. Usually you have the optical connections through the optical cables, but now NTT is trying to build the it's a radio transmission of the optical photonics, and this is a very hard technology to do, but the many companies are now trying to do that in between the satellites and also satellite and the ground station. And if this happens, then it would change another game changers to reduce the energy consumption for the data center on the ground and to make it much more energy efficient in space. So again, this is another attempt for Japan to acquire the indispensability. And furthermore, I think it is important that the geoeconomic speaking, that where it happens it matters a lot. NTT is in Japan, so Japan, this technology, which is the Japan hosting this technology, is important. But at the same time, space doesn't belong to anybody. And I think this is where the international, transnational cooperation is possible. So Japan and the United States can work together in space, together with this new technology produced by the NTT, will be some sort of a contribution for the joint indispensability between Japan and the United States. So I thought that these are two interesting presentations by two excellent gentlemen, and I think this has resonate to what I've said in the podium. So I'm very happy to hear these presentations. That's my comment.
Thank you for your comments. My job was moderating, which means coordinating, and then you have coordinated. So
I took you. Knows about NTT much better. I do. Thank you for us.
Do you have any? So I would like to open to the floor for discussion. So anybody who has who wants to kick off? Yeah, Grant.
My question's nothing to do with space or technology. It's primarily for Suzuki Sensei, but as U.S., particularly Trump, goes sort of away from international alliances, I think the role of in including our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, I think Japan has a great opportunity to become a true close partner to the U.S. My question is there opportunity? Abe-san had a close relationship with Trump, including playing golf and all that. I don't know how Ishiba-san is capable of developing that kind of relationship, or my real question is there somebody in Japan like yourself who's a global visionary, or Suzuki-san's boss, Jun Sawada-san, or Masayoshi Son, somebody like that, away from the typical Japanese politician? Is there opportunity for somebody like that to rise to the top and become a global leader or leader of Japan? It's not an easy question.
I think well, nobody can replace Abe-san. He was exceptional. He had totally different characteristics. Mr. Ishiba cannot replace him. Nobody can. And I think it was fortunate that we had Mr. Abe in the first administration. But I think it's the dynamics of the bilateral relationship has changed. I think the Mr. Trump is more focused on the the domestic industry and how to protect it. For example, he announced about the tariff on automobile, which doesn't exclude any alliance partners, including Japan, South Korea, or Europe. I think he has more concentrated on the domestic issue, unlike the first term that he has more international. He was more open to international communication. So no matter whether it's Masayoshi-san or whoever, Sawada-san or whoever comes to the leadership in the Trump administration, the Japanese administration, I don't think it's even if Mr. Abe was alive and come back to the prime ministership, I don't think he would be able to communicate as much as he could in the first administration. So I think I wouldn't depend on this bilateral, personal relationship to Mr. Trump. I think it's much rather the country-to-country, state-to-state relationship, using more formal channels, and the importance is how to reach the White House, and I think it requires a lot of channels to seek, and I think it's Mr. Trump no longer pays too much attention to who the leaders are in the allied countries. So the probably the game has changed, and we cannot just depend on the individual. So I think Mr. Ishiba, his visit in February was relatively successful. At least nothing strange happened, so everything was normal. And being a normal is the top value in this situation. But I think, I think it was successful. So I think it was a combination of the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Department of State working together to build all the shift all the way to the White House to make sure that nothing happens. So it was very much designed and controlled meeting, but we are not sure that it's going to take place. It's going to go further in the next meeting. So we do everything we can, but at least we cannot just depend on the individual characteristics.
Julia.
Thank you. Well, with the discussion of space and technology, I can't help but thinking about Elon Musk and Starlink and SpaceX and the dependency he's created on his companies and technologies. So how do you see a player like that fitting into what you all are talking about?
Well, Stan.
So I think that it gets at sort of that idea of the robust complementarity that I was talking about, which is how is there sufficient strength to ensure that one is not overly dependent on something that could become a vulnerability. And I think in the area of particularly low Earth orbit satellite communications, for example, which is what Starlink does, and just for everybody who may be aware, but just to clarify that Starlink operates in a new regime. And what it did that was different is it brought down traditional communication satellites, which would operate very high orbits, geosynchronous orbits typically, and with just a few large satellites be able to provide communications over a broad area of the Earth. They made a bunch of very small satellites and brought them down closer to the Earth. And because those launch costs had gone down that I'd mentioned, and because the technology in a few other areas, like the microelectronics and some areas to do with antenna technologies had improved, they were able to move this down very close. And then that allows the radio waves to not have to travel as far. So it ends up being faster and overall less expensive as a network, more responsive. So that's sort of the technical and business piece of why Starlink is where it is today. But it's not alone. And because what it's done is it's proven this new business model. First of all, there are other direct competitors that are coming into that low Earth orbit communication constellation regime. Other things have also happened with traditional players where there are now partnerships that have developed between those who have the old satellites, if you will, the traditional ones that were at a greater distance, the geosynchronous satellites, and those who have others in different orbits. And they're working partnerships to come up with maybe what they call hybrid constellations that may actually in some ways be even more efficient than what Starlink is doing. So I think my answer to that would be that the non-dependence here comes from continued innovation, and the game isn't over by any means. Yes, there's a certain I think great success and great value that Starlink has demonstrated, but there's more to come, to include Japanese companies that are doing innovation in this area. So I think my response or the solution to that would be to keep innovating, keep looking for value creating opportunities. And then there won't be this sort of an excessive dependence on a single system.
The other, Suzuki-san.
Yeah, in technology world, you especially called about Elon Musk, and then we talked about the Doge, right? So to be honest, at this point, everyone just wait and see mode. Could be good, could be bad. But NTT, as I mentioned, is in the challenger position, especially in the North America's market. So we have to take some advantage from these changes, right? So after the change of policy, the money is going to the different place potentially. So that's the opportunity for the challengers to expand some our business, with competing with the existing IT vendors or some other technologies. So we have to make this chance. But the other thing is not only Elon, but under the new Trump administration, immigration policy is critical for us. NTT doesn't have factory. We are not product out company. Our biggest asset is people, engineer, talent, right? So how can we attract all of those engineers, talent across the world, right? And then 80% of our employees, the global IT service business based in India currently. So the visa issue, the critical, it's not so much chaos so far, especially India, but globally, we may see some of the confusion about that, especially the Chinese engineer and some other specific region or countries. But could be the chance for the Japanese engineer, for example, could cost competitiveness, and then more door opens for the Japanese engineers because of the friendship between the US and the Japan type of thing. So we have to think about those of the dynamics as we move forward. So again, all of the changes is scary, but we are actively looking for the opportunity to expand our business from the NTT perspective.
Suzuki-sensei,
I have nothing much to add, but I think the business model by the Elon Musk is, I think it changed the whole dynamics of the space development, because he owns not only the satellites companies, Starlink, but also he launches those satellites by themselves. So the cost of building a satellite and launching is combined in one set of company. And I think this is a new business model which reduces or just disperses the cost into the services. Usually when you are a launch company like SpaceX, then you need a customer. Then if you don't have a customer or don't have enough customer, you reduce the launch opportunities. But Elon Musk, since he has its own satellite companies, so he has from a launch company's point of view, the customer is always there. So that makes the launch much cheaper because the frequency is more. and there's it's a scalability. It has economies of scale works. So I think that is something that very interesting. Of course, the technology of reusing the first stage is also another interesting part. So I think this has changed the dynamics of space. Space traditionally is that you need to have a technology in order to achieve this or that. Go to moon, you need to have a huge rockets and landers and everything. And now Elon Musk has created the market-oriented space development. You want to build the satellite to give us services, to telecommunication services, and revenue stream comes from the service provided, the providing of services. Then those revenues goes back to the building the satellite programs and then the launch programs. So this combination is quite a new business model in space. And I think this is affecting on the other commercial businesses because it's no longer the technology-oriented businesses. It's the demand pull, the demand-oriented space activities. And I think this is a totally new idea. So that's the revolutionary part of Elon Musk. But as the political part of Elon Musk is another thing. And that's I don't know. I mean, I think I'm just refrain from talking about it.
May I add one point on this? Because you're absolutely right. And I want to underscore what you said in one point and then add to it. That it's the linkage of the technology to the business model is really one of the key differentiators of why SpaceX has been able to be so successful. But let me just put, first of all, a finer point on what that was, and then talk about why that is still going to potentially be changing. So the specific thing that SpaceX has really done, I agree with the market orientation point of it and finding a way to generate revenue for what one does. That's absolutely critical. Technically, what he's really done is also remove a lot of waste through vertical integration. And so being able to control costs and be able to eliminate what in the prior aerospace industry had frankly been a bunch of inefficient layers where things moved slowly and there was from any business standpoint, if you know about utilization and unproductive overhead, that was the entire aerospace industry before he came along. But I don't want to just leave it there because if we just try to extrapolate from there, that would tend to say that the solution is to have other very big players vertically integrate as well, and we create these giants that have to fight against each other of vertical integration. That's actually not the most efficient business model as an economy matures. So the question, I think one of the most fundamental questions right now in the space economy is, are we getting to a point where we can go back to efficient horizontal integration? Because that's what really opens up tremendous opportunity for small, medium enterprises, particularly so many of Japanese technology companies, to get into supply chains, to be able to provide a particular element very effectively and at low cost, without having to try to own the entire value chain, because owning the value chain is really hard. Elon moved at the right time to be able to do this. It's very hard for anybody to replicate that. And I think ultimately horizontal integration is more robust and more adaptable than vertical integration is. So I think that's a big question.
David.
My question is on this upcoming meeting between the U.S. Secretary Defense and the Japanese Defense Minister. It's very interesting that they're going to talk about this collaboration in developing detection for the hypersonic glide vehicle. But that's only part of the problem. U.S. and many other Western countries has unfortunately not put a lot of focus on that technology for a while. So now we are playing a lot of catch up. China is the leader. Russia is close second, from what I understand. So even with the successful development of a satellite detection system, it's only a warning system. There's no capability to intercept or do anything about it. So from a defense perspective, how's US and Japan going to look at that problem? So it's different than a nuclear and missile problem where everyone has the arsenal, and you hit a button, I hit a button, and we'll see how many we can intercept. But hypersonic is different. We may know China or Russia is launching, but we can't do anything. So what's your thought on that?
It's your experience.
So I can talk a little bit about it technically, and but I think politically and is another question. So just to again sort of terms, hypersonics means traditionally going more than 5 times the speed of sound, and very, very fast. But in a sense, if we look back at the history of missile defense, particularly missiles that would travel intercontinental distances, they all have been hypersonics. So the speed itself is not what's novel with hypersonics. And so if we go back to the sort of canonical missile defense, ballistic missile defense, and Reagan Nakasone and some of those long-standing U.S.-Japan ballistic missile defense cooperation agreements, which were really unique in the two countries' ability to collaborate in an era where Japan was doing very little defense-oriented work at that level. This was an outlier, a unique area. But the speed of those systems was hypersonic, and so defenses against things that move fast and tracking them is actually something we know a bit about and have been working on together for a long time. Now, where the term hypersonics gets to be used now is actually in combination with some certain trajectories and flight profiles that do things like maneuver and maybe don't follow a purely ballistic path. And so therefore you're combining speed with unpredictability. And that does complicate the problem, as do other things like decoys did before. So the whole ballistic missile or missile defense problem set hasn't changed. What's really happened is that Russia and China have gone back to some older technologies that were originally developed in the 1960s, these maneuvering shorter range, in some cases, missiles, and they've decided to go and bring these back up, which complicates the defense problem. So there is some background there. Now, so technically, it's not a new regime. You're right that after you detect, you still have to, and track, you still have to intercept. So we have to go back to some of the ideas that were developed before about very energetic kinetic interceptors to go reach these targets quickly. You have to look at things like directed energy intercepting, which is another topic that I've spent quite a bit of time in different parts of my career. So there are lots of technologies then to deal with that. The real challenge where this starts to become more almost a political question is that these become very expensive as systems to build. It's not a technical one, it's not a conceptual one, it's not just the speed, but then to actually do this, it's kind of like the problem of the Starlink, because you have to start being able to cover everywhere all the time. And that starts to get very expensive. And so I think the budgetary question that goes with fielding solutions is going to be probably the next big question, I would think, that comes next. So not an easy answer. It's not just the speed of the systems, but I think that Japan and the US, of any two countries, have the best technical and cooperative foundation to be able to be discussing this, thanks to the history of the ballistic missile defense cooperation.
You want to add?
Well, that's exactly why Mr. Hexis and Mr. Nakatani are meeting together and talk about the political budgetary issues, who's going to pay for what. So that's the sort of a meeting. So politically, I think it is a necessary system, but it's very expensive. So it cannot be done by only United States or, of course, not Japan alone. It requires collaboration.
Actually, I would like to close with one very simple question. What is the difference between computer and AI? And then how does that difference matter? Maybe
Probably let's ask AI.
So for closing remarks from each of the panelists, please include your answer to that question.
Yeah, that's a very tough question, right? So, but probably just let's think about AI. Who has answered already my question, right? So AI could be anything probably at this point of time. So today, Suzuki Sensei and some others talk about our chairman, Sawada-san. So he's a kind of the founder of the ION technology, and he is really passionately promoting this activity. But after he, retires from the business front role, recently he established a philosophy company in Kyoto. Maybe Suzuki Sensei is familiar with that. So in Gen AI era, that type of the concept is more important. So the essence of the communication, the who we are, what's a human being type of thing, what's the real value of this world? So, asking the question, the deeper side of the deeper side. So, and then how can we human beings can take part of this world to make this world better? And how can we be happier with using the technology? I think Gen AI or AI could be that part, could be the partner of this human being that. So, but that's the same point. That's why everyone talking about, scary part of the AI as well, right? So if we don't have the right regulation or right ethics of using the Gen AI, probably this world is gonna be collapsed or something like that. So how to, deal with the Gen AI as a human resources? That's the that the biggest question to us, and probably nobody has answers. And then this type of the thing, I don't know, in our history, probably it never happened yet. So that probably we are so first time we are facing this type of the big issues, especially we talk about some singularity type of thing. Computer can be smarter than the human being. Hopefully the answer is no, but to make such a world, so we have to be wiser. We have, we always have to be the owner of the technology. So I think that's I don't know. That's the biggest aspect of the Gen AI that we have to deal with. I don't know if this is the answer for your question. But
if you can answer that question like immediately, then and clearly, then like that would be like that would not be a good question. But Stan.
I mean, a simple technical question response to what's the difference between a computer and AI is that AI is basically math. AI is a program that runs on a computer, and the computer computes it. And so there are complementary capabilities, how one calculates the algorithm, and then the mechanism. They both grow together. But I like actually, Suzuki-san's approach, because you took more of almost a philosophical and a human interaction response to what does it mean to us, because I think they both mean similar things in these tools, and they're both tools, related tools, give us more ability to extend our reach. They do require us to continue to educate ourselves on how to use them, what the dangers are, what the limits are, but they're tools. But they're tools we have to keep an eye on and make sure that we use them correctly.
Dr. Suzuki?
Nothing more to add. I think, yes, the AI is of course the game changer of the human society and the way in which that we work or we live. And I think the philosophical approach is important. But at the same time, AI enhances the a lot of human activities. So if we can properly use the AI and the computer, and probably in the future the quantum computing is probably entering into more daily life, which creates much faster and much stronger computing power. That of course enhances the AI capability as well. So I think yes, I think it's been only 2 decades ago we didn't have the smartphones, but smartphones changed our daily lives. The GPS, navigations, social communications, social network, everything has changed. And I think there are lots of businesses appeared. So we shall not be afraid of what's coming next, but I think what we need to do is to make sure that we can use these technologies as an opportunity and to create more new services, new idea, and then enhance our social activities. And of course, like social network with disinformation or the hacking, or there are negative sides of these technologies all the time. But if we try to mitigate those risks and make sure that we enhance our humanity through the AI and computing, I think it will make our lives better, I hope.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, last question.
Okay, I'll try and shorten it up. You've all addressed the Goliaths, what about the Davids, all the people that are going to implement stuff? Just in time, yes, I'm old. Just in time, ISO 9000, they're great opportunities only if we educate the people. We have to educate the people, we have to make them understand or help them understand that the other employee that they're working with doesn't put their feet on the floor in the morning and go, gosh, how am I going to make them mad today? It's a way to team up and work together. Got to think about the people, not just the engineers, but people down in the trenches. One here going to say, I need a human, I need a human, I need a human, and the AI is not responding. That's one. And the other comment was space isn't owned. Maybe you might think about between Japan and America putting something in place so no one's ever up to try and own space. This human thinking over historical is that let's own this. Let's go here and own this property, own this land, let's fence it, let's do this, let's do that. And space is open. If you're looking for ideas, it's just a 72-year-old world of looking at the way the world is, and a company owner that once looked at employees and tried to get them to work together. Because that's down in the trenches. I think in college you have to audit things, and you can look at a website, and this department has that they have 100,000 employees, and this department says no, it's 200,000, and this department says no, it's 300,000, and they're all over the world, and no one's communicating. That's what I'm finding with the cell phone world. So just some input from school person to look at. Maybe it's about the people, and I think you address that as well.
Thank you. Anybody who wants to respond to comments?
Maybe just, I agree. The workforce, and I would just differentiate it into both workforce and consumers, and the people matters in both areas. Those who are going to be producing these capabilities, there's a lot there to continue to be effective. And again, I think U.S.-Japan collaboration on workforce can be really helpful. We bring complementary capabilities.
I thought it was an answer to the question.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Well, one thing I say is that the first quarter of the 21st century was the age of computer, and computer speed got faster very in a rapid pace. But now, it's a technological advancement moves toward AI, and then that's actually very different. We are in the university, and then kind of our generation has built our career in the first quarter of the 21st century, along with the fast development of computer. But now that our students have to build a career in the age of AI. So that's why I was very curious about what's the difference and what's the implication of that difference. But I think that we need another symposium to discuss it. So thank you very much for coming. That's great. Yeah. And then we all are human. So as those who are taking my class know that my syllabus, that the first sentence is, don't forget that professors are also human. I sometimes feel like our students also forget that. But before closing, please join me for thanking Astrid, who makes this symposium possible. And please join me for thanking our panelists. Thank you very much for coming. Please pay attention to Koho Center website. And our next Soundstar event is April 29th on American changing trade policy toward East Asia and beyond. So thank you for coming.